It always begins the same way, with something slipping through your hands while you're still pretending it belongs to you. And only much later do you realize the pain of letting go was never punishment. It was preparation. You don't see it at first. You call it loss. You call it heartbreak. You call it betrayal. But what if the truth is far more uncomfortable? What if what left your life wasn't taken from you, but removed for you? There is a moment in every person's life where reality quietly changes shape. Someone you trusted becomes a stranger. Something you built collapses without warning. A future you were certain about dissolves into silence. And in that silence, you are forced to sit with a question no one prepares you for. Who are you when nothing is holding you together anymore? Most people run from that question. They fill the void with distractions, new faces, new goals, new noise. But the strange part is, the pain doesn't leave. It waits, it watches, and it grows sharper every time you ignore it, because letting go is not an event. It is an awakening disguised as loss. Carl Jung once hinted at something unsettling, that what we resist does not disappear, it only deepens its grip on us. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think healing means forgetting, but real healing begins when forgetting is no longer possible, and you are forced to understand, and that's exactly where this story begins. Because the pain you're avoiding right now might actually be the doorway to the version of you you were always meant to become. But here's the question that changes everything. What if the thing you are struggling to let go of was never meant to stay in the first place? And if that's true, then what exactly is being taken from you, and what is finally being revealed? Stay with this, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about loss, love, and the hidden intelligence behind your pain. There is a strange comfort in holding on to what is already gone. It gives the illusion of control. The mind whispers, if I just try harder, if I just understand more, if I just fix myself, maybe it will return. But here's what most people never realize. Holding on is often just fear disguised as love. You don't miss the person. You miss the version of yourself that existed when they were still there. You don't grieve the relationship alone. You grieve the identity you built around it. And that is why letting go feels like dying, because something actually is dying, not your future, but your attachment to a story that no longer fits reality. Think about it. A relationship ends, but your mind keeps replaying old conversations. A friendship breaks, but your heart still expects their name to appear on your screen. A dream collapses, but your identity refuses to update. This is where Marcus Aurelius becomes painfully relevant. He wrote about the idea that suffering begins when we demand reality to obey our expectations, and the modern world has only amplified this suffering. Social media makes absence feel louder. Silence feels personal. Distance feels like rejection of your entire worth. But at first, this makes no sense, because your emotions are louder than your logic. You keep asking, why did they leave? When the deeper question is, why am I still there? There was a man who lost everything he thought defined him, his relationship, his job, and the version of his future he had been building for years. For months, he tried to recreate what was gone. He checked old messages. He revisited old places. He even tried to become the person he was when things were good, but nothing worked. And then something unexpected happened. Exhaustion replaced resistance, and in that exhaustion, silence finally entered. And that's where everything changed, because in silence, he realized something terrifying. He was not missing them. He was missing the illusion that he needed them to feel whole. Most people never reach this point. They stay trapped in repetition, believing effort will resurrect what reality has already ended. But reality is indifferent to emotional bargaining. And this is the first hidden truth. What leaves your life without clarity is not always a loss. Sometimes it is a removal. But if that's true, then who or what is doing the removing? And more importantly, what is it trying to make room for? Because what happens when life doesn't take something from you, but takes something for you? That's where we go next. There is a stage in letting go where the pain stops feeling emotional and starts feeling physical. It sits in your chest like weight. It follows you into silence. It shows up in random moments, while eating, while walking, while pretending you're okay. And this is where most people break, because they assume pain means something is wrong. But the strange part is, not all pain is destruction. Some pain is purification. Buddha spoke about suffering not as a curse, but as a signal, an awakening force that reveals attachment. And Epictetus went even further, suggesting that we are disturbed not by events, but by the meaning we assign to them. So if pain is not the enemy, then what is it? Pain, in its rawest form, is information. It is reality forcing honesty into your life. Think of heartbreak. It doesn't just end a relationship, it exposes every dependency hidden inside it. It reveals how much of your self-worth was outsourced, how much of your happiness depended on someone else's presence, and that is uncomfortable to admit. But here's what most people never realize. The intensity of your pain is often equal to the depth of your attachment, not the importance of what you lost. A girl once spent years building her identity around a relationship. Every future plan included him. Every emotional reaction depended on him. Every version of happiness required him. When he left, it didn't just feel like heartbreak, it felt like erasure. For weeks, she believed she was broken. She called it betrayal. She called it abandonment. But slowly, something started to shift. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she stopped resisting it. And in that surrender, she noticed something unexpected. The thoughts became clearer. The emotional noise became quieter. And underneath all of it, there was a version of her that had never needed anyone to exist. This is where everything changes, because pain does not just destroy illusions, it burns them away. Nietzsche once suggested that what does not kill us strengthens us. But what he meant was deeper than motivation quotes. He meant that suffering strips away everything false until only truth remains. And truth is rarely comfortable at first. So if you are hurting right now, it may not mean you are losing yourself. It may mean everything false about you is being removed. But then a terrifying question appears. If everything false is being removed, what remains when the pain finally stops shaping you? And that is where the transformation begins. There is a moment in every letting go process that no one warns you about. It is not the pain. It is not the sadness. It is the emptiness that follows. Because once the emotional storm begins to settle, you are left with silence. And silence is uncomfortable when you are used to chaos. At first it feels like something is missing, but slowly you realize something even more unsettling. Nothing is chasing you anymore. No more waiting for messages, no more replaying conversations, no more emotional anticipation, just space. And that space feels unfamiliar. Marcus Aurelius would describe this as the return to inner territory, the mind no longer occupied by external obsession. But modern psychology would call it withdrawal. And this is why most people rush to fill it again. New relationships, new distractions, new addictions, anything to avoid the emptiness. But here's what most people never realize. Emptiness is not absence, it is potential. A man once described his breakup as losing his entire world. For months, he lived in emotional collapse. But one day, he stopped trying to replace what was gone. Instead, he sat with the silence, and something strange happened. He began noticing things he had ignored for years, his own thoughts, his neglected dreams, his forgotten interests. The same space that once felt like punishment slowly became clarity. This is where Lao Tzu becomes relevant. He spoke of emptiness as usefulness, the idea that a cup is valuable because it is empty, not full, and that's where everything shifts. Because letting go does not just remove people, it reveals you. But this revelation comes with a question most people avoid. If you are still uncomfortable in your own silence, was it ever love you were holding on to, or distraction from yourself? And once you begin to see that, there is no going back to the old version of you, because now something new is forming in the quiet, and what is forming is far more powerful than what was lost. There comes a point where the pain no longer feels like an enemy. It starts to feel like a teacher that refused to leave until you finally understood the lesson. And the lesson is never about them. It is always about you. Letting go, in its deepest form, is not about forgetting someone. It is about remembering yourself without them. And this is where transformation begins. Because once you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking a far more powerful question. Who am I becoming because of this? Viktor Frankl, who survived unimaginable suffering, once said that when we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And heartbreak, in its quiet brutality, does exactly that. It forces evolution. A person who once depended on external validation begins to find internal stability. Someone who once feared loneliness begins to understand solitude. Someone who once chased love begins to recognize self-respect. But here's what most people never realize. The version of you that emerges after loss is not a repair. It is a reconstruction. And reconstruction always requires destruction first. Think about it. Forest fires destroy everything, yet they create conditions for new life. Old structures collapse, not because life is cruel, but because they can no longer hold what you are becoming. And that is the final hidden truth. Not everything that breaks you is meant to be fixed. Some things are meant to end you as you were, so you can begin as something else. There is a version of you that only exists after the letting go. A calmer version, a wiser version, a quieter, stronger, more grounded version. But you cannot meet that version while still clinging to the past. And this is where everything converges. Because what you thought was loss was actually transition. What you thought was abandonment was redirection. And what you thought was the end was actually the beginning of a self you had not yet met. But the question remains, are you willing to let the old version of you fully disappear so the new one can finally arrive? In the end, letting go was never about loss. It was always about clarity disguised as pain. The human mind resists endings because it confuses familiarity with safety. But life does not operate on comfort, it operates on evolution. And evolution is often painful precisely because it does not ask for permission. Every person you lose, every chapter that ends, every version of your life that collapses is not random. It is a quiet restructuring of identity. And when you look back, you will realize something strange. The moments that hurt you the most were the same moments that removed everything unnecessary from your life. Marcus Aurelius called it acceptance of fate. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are. Buddha called it detachment. But all of them were pointing to the same truth in different languages, that freedom is not found in holding on, but in no longer needing to. And this is the deepest gift hidden inside letting go, not the return of what was lost, but the discovery of what was always within you, waiting for silence, waiting for emptiness, waiting for the space that only pain could create. So when you feel that ache again, when memory pulls you backward, when silence feels unbearable, remember this: it is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your awareness. And one day, you will look at everything you once begged to keep, and you will finally understand why it had to leave, because what was taken from you was never your loss. It was your liberation. And in that realization, you don't just let go, you finally arrive.